Well, I've gathered up my items for week 3 of Seek, Gather, Create August. And I'm still going to work in my Ricky Tikki Tavi, the Bricolage Factory art journal. And I have some fuchsia. I used fuchsia, which I thought was my only fuchsia here, coincidentally, for week 1, or maybe that was 2. No, that was 2. That was 1. This was 2. And so I just glimmered out of the corner of my eye this gloss media by Dina Wakley, and it is fuchsia. So I'm trying to use these up, so this will be a good opportunity to do that. I am going to need to protect my other pages, though, because this might go everywhere. Anyways, I also pulled out, you need an eye. Well, I don't really do eyes, so that was a little tricky. I did find this little froggy that I got out of a children's book, a vintage children's book, and there's an eye. So that was my eye. And then also from the Bricolage Factory, I have this paper ruffle. And yeah, so ruffle, right? Ruffle? Yeah, bubbles, ruffle, and eye in the color fuchsia. So that is the only thing I don't have are the bubbles, which I'm still trying to figure out. But I figured we'd get started maybe with a little bit of collage first, and then come in maybe with some gesso, and then this gloss spray. Oh, I think I have an idea for bubble. We'll see how this goes. See if I can make this work. So collage first. So I'm gonna pull out my bits basket that's gotten very full. Oops. And see what I can find in here. So this first item I'm using as collage fodder is product labels that were misprinted, and I've just used them as under paper, so they've collected color and different mediums on them, and now they're going into a piece of art rather than into the landfill, and I feel pretty darn good about that. next pieces are new also to my basket, and they are cut-offs of some of my granddaughter June's water, well, no, they're finger paint masterpieces, and I've cut them down to use them in other places, and these were the edges. So I thought, how better than to use them and not put them into landfill? Put them into a piece of art. So they're made with finger paint, and so it doesn't want to stick really well to the paper. So I went over it with some clear gesso, and that helped out a great deal. You're gonna see some of it coming up still, but it's not bleeding as much as it would have had I not put that clear gesso over them. As per my usual, I'm coming in with some white gesso, and I'm going to apply that with my fingers. I'm going to focus on the edges of the papers where it's really stark in contrast to the background paper, so that I can bring them all into being one, visually one layer. Are you ready for a ride? This is how I'm going to do bubble. When I pulled out the fuchsia gloss media, I don't know what she's calling them now. They're in a dropper bottle now. I think they're media gloss. In the fuchsia, I recalled that when I shake them up, it gets all bubbly inside there. And whenever I open it up, it spews out all these bubbles. And I thought, oh, I can do that. So I shook up the fuchsia, as you see here, and screwed it open, and nothing. It gave me a big old blop on my page. So then I go to, well, okay, what can I do? Well, maybe it'll work for doing the bubble method with soapy water. So I go get soapy water in a straw, blow on bubbles, add the color. It blows bubbles. I think, okay, this will be good. And nothing. And I realized that the media gloss is probably too heavy for these bubbles to carry it. So I dribbled a little bit really slowly on top of the bubbles, and I got my first marks on my page. And that was awesome. Then I go, that didn't work every time, so that was really frustrating. So then I kept, experimenting, and I found that I could pull the bubbles out of the container and keep them as bubbles onto a piece of paper that was less, it didn't absorb as much. And I could then kind of pat those bubbles onto my page, and I would still get bubbles. So that ended up working. I don't have a ton of bubbles on this layout, but I have bubbles, and you can see them in the background. And I'm pretty darn happy about it. And I left all that footage in here for you so that you can see my struggle. But I persevered. And I had all that color in that soapy water, so I thought, oh, I'll dip my ruffle into it and get some coloration. But it was when I did that that I really got to see that the soap was repelling the media gloss. And so I got it saturated with the soapy water and got a tiny tinge of color with that. But then I went and dribbled the media gloss over the ruffle and got a bigger saturation, and it just made some really cool marks on the ruffle where it was light in some areas and dark in others because it really repelled that media gloss. It was kind of cool. Nice discovery. All right, it's time to get Mr. Frog added to the front of this page as my focal point. And the only thing I really knew is that I wanted him to go on the right side to cover up the fuchsia splooge. And I felt like he was going to blend in. So I did find some fabric that was dark, like those labels had some of that really nice dark on it. And so I decided to use that as well as edge him in the Ranger Distress Archival ink in ground espresso. But before I do that, I realize there's not very much green. The green that's on here is kind of hidden, and there is some, but I needed to add a little bit of green just to bring him in a little bit more as a partner in the scene. So I am going to come also in with the Distress Archival ink in peeled paint and ground espresso into the background, and then finish off Mr. Frog. I did play around a lot with using some of that leftover fabric as a tab. I just didn't like the way that it looked. I really felt like it was like glaring and it didn't go well with the rest of the layout, so I opted not to do that. But in the long run, I end up using that extra piece of fabric for the background to my words. And I didn't have a hard time even finding my words this time, which is usually a chore sometimes, because I don't feel like just slapping words on there is going to work. I feel like it needs to be something that speaks to the layout, that correlates with it. It's part of it. And so sometimes finding the right words is kind of a challenge. If you've liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, please list them down below in the comments and I'll get back to you. And if you're new here and you haven't yet subscribed and you like my content, if you would consider subscribing, I would appreciate it. Thank you.